I have for you a cat, but also my August TBR. So this month, my TBR had more than my usual 4 books. It had 6, and I read 6 books. Just not entirely the 6 books I was supposed to read. So the first book that I finished this month was actually from my July TBR. It was one of the 2 books that I hadn't finished, so it got moved. And that is The Double Life of Incorporate Things by Leanna Renee Haber. This is the final book in the Magic Most Foul series. And honestly, I was a bit disappointed in it. But also The Twisted Tragedy of Miss Natalie Stewart. They didn't have the same, awesome qualities that the first one had. So in Darker Still, you have the character Natalie Stewart, who is mute. She is the daughter of a museum curator, and one day he acquires this painting, and she touches the painting, falls into the painting, and discovers that the man painted in the painting is actually trapped inside the painting, and she goes on this quest to free the man. And this is told to you through her diary, which is in the hands of a police officer who's trying to piece together these strange events that are going on. So you have this mystery inside that's being unraveled through this journal that this police officer has come to. The second and third book lose that aspect of it, and it just focuses on Natalie telling the story herself. I'm not really willing to forgive some of the things that I see, like the constant desire of Natalie to point out how beautiful Jonathan Denbury is. She spends so much time focusing on how beautiful he is in the midst of crisis that it underwhelms the story and the severity of the situation that she's in. In the first book, I can forgive this because it's a diary. Things are coming in retrospect, and if you're gonna spend some time gushing on things you probably shouldn't when you're writing, as opposed to just flat out telling the story, which is happening in the later books. So while I'm not sure I would recommend the second and third book, the first book is still really good, so I would still recommend Darker Still. The next book I was supposed to read in August was The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman, the second book for my July TBR that did not get finished, and I will be seeing you in September because I have not gotten to you yet. So that concludes the books that technically I was supposed to read before I got into August, but didn't, and then I didn't read one of them when I got into August, so now I'm going to be reading it in September. But that brings me to the 4 books that were actually on my TBR. The first book on my TBR is actually the reason that this video is going up on September 1st as opposed to August 31st, which is the Thursday when I normally upload my videos. The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. This is the last book I read. I literally spent reading it up to the wire. I could have finished it or filmed this video before finishing it, but this book is a book that I feel like I appreciate more than I like. It is the story of some high schoolers who live in a town where strange things keep happening. The way it's formatted is in the start of each chapter you get a bold text. This bold text is what the heroes are doing, or as they're called in this book, indie kids. And then the rest of the story is the regular characters just going about and living their life. They're not necessarily all regular characters. They have some quirks about them that make them kind of like they should be indie kids, but they're not. They're just the regular people. Like I said, it's one that I appreciated more than I like. So far, these 2 books that I have shown you have both gotten 3 stars. Shadowrun by Adrian Strickland and Michael Miller. This is a space story. This is told in dual perspective. You have the perspectives of Neve and Quol. Neve is a prince in hiding, and Quol is the captain of a starship that is used to basically harvest or fish this thing called shadow, which is a very mysterious substance, which plays a part, though it's never been clearly defined what shadow is, just that it's highly toxic. I would say if you need something to compare it to, think of space nuclear power, and they're basically harvesting nuclear material. That would be the best way to describe what Shadow feels like in this book. I do feel this book would have been a very typical love story, just set in space, if not for a single character, and that character is Basra, who is a hidden gem in this book. I know a lot of people like to point to the fact that Basra is gender fluid as the main reason that he is so well liked. They do refer to Basra a lot as a he in this book, though sometimes she is actually referred to as a she, so It really just depends on what Basra actually looks like and is acting like in that particular scene. But that is not what makes Basra a badass. Basra being a badass, you find out in the last little bit of the book. Like, you know, I was kind of iffy on whether or not I wanted to continue reading the series. Not because it's bad, I really did enjoy it. It's just I've been trying to read books that I'm really, like, excited about. But Basra being in this and seeing what Basra is going to do next is what is making me excited about this book. But continuing on with the plot, basically, Neve is recruited to go recruit Quoll to help with some experiments, and she reluctantly agrees to do this, and then things just spiral out of control. But again, Basra is seriously one of the best characters that I have read this year. I enjoy just like how much of a hidden badass gem he is. This is probably my second favorite book of the month. Probably the most favorite book that I read, since my favorite book was actually an audiobook. The next book off my TBR was Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. I actually listened to the audiobook of this, and no, this is not my favorite book of the month. I really did enjoy this. I do feel like I can see Cassandra Clare growing as a writer as I read more of her books. And because of that, I do think I am going to pick up the Mortal Instruments series. But again, it's really going to depend on Clockwork Princess, which I haven't gotten to yet. I have to say, I am actually starting to enjoy the Shadowhunter world a little bit more than I did in those first 3 books. Then the final book off of my TBR is Inkdeath by Cornelia Funk, the final book in the Inkheart trilogy. And this is the other book I didn't get to this month. I have to be in the mood to read this. I just, again, wasn't in the mood. But it didn't help that a lot of the books I read this month were just okay, and they took me longer than I expected because I didn't enjoy them as much as I was expecting. And I just kind of, it wasn't necessarily a slump, it was more like a slosh. I was in a reading slosh. Everything just kind of ended up dragging my feet through all of it. I actually ended up putting The Rest of Us Just Live Here down about halfway through and picking up Shadowrun just to see if maybe that was better, and it was so much better. I did give Shadowrun and Clockwork Angel both 4 stars because they were like the 2 books that kind of like pushed me through most of the month. And they were the ones that kind of like kept me up and motivated. But like I said, I did read 6 books, and you have seen that I haven't read 2 of the books on my TBR, which means I read 2 books that weren't on my TBR this month. They are both my favorite and least favorite books of the month. So starting with my most favorite, that is The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan. This is the audiobook that I listened to, and honestly, Lester Papadopoulos is one of my favorite characters this year. That is the name for Apollo when he is cast out in human form, and honestly, I just hope Apollo, at the end of the series, has learned all of the lessons that he is learning, and he keeps them, and he remembers them, and he continues to be Lester, because he is just so good. So that is the only book that I gave 5 stars this month, and I mean, it's really hard with a Rick Riordan book for me not to give it a 5-star, because I just love all of Rick Riordan's work. I love mythology of any kind, and he basically just, every time I read one of his books, like, here's this thing you like, and you just have more of it. Have more. And I just can't say no. But then, from the high note to the low note, and the book that took me the longest to read and that I seriously considered DNFing, and I probably should have, but I didn't want to give it a 1 star, and I would have if I DNF'd it, which I don't normally do. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the cover for it off my Nook. I have said in many of my videos that I've only ever given out 5 1 stars, and those were all for books that I had to read in school. This next book that I'm going to show you, I almost gave this one a 1 star. It was the last 3 chapters in the book that bumped it up a star. The School for Good and Evil, The Last Ever After by Soman Chinani, the final book in the School for Good and Evil series. I didn't really like this series to begin with. I probably should have stopped after the first book, but I was just expecting it to get better, expecting the characters to learn and grow, and it wasn't until the last 3 chapters that one of the characters grew a tiny little bit. The first half of this book, the first 2 parts of this book, because it's broken up into 3 parts, is Sophie trying to decide whether or not she's actually good or evil, and coming to terms with the fate that she has been assigned. And the other two characters, Tedros and Agatha, they just yelled at each other just screamed at each other the entire time, and everyone's like, oh, isn't true love sweet? And it's like, no, they're yelling at each other. There's nothing sweet about that. If these characters had been older, if this had been a YA book instead of a middle grade, this would have been abusive on all sides. Like, people would be like, no. But everyone's like, oh, so cute, little kids fighting. And no. Like, people die in the series, and it's literally glossed over. Someone dies in this book, and they're literally, like, raid the body. Like, what? It's not till you get to the very end of the book where you get the backstory of their parents and how their story came to be, and Sophie comes to terms with herself, that this book got anywhere near decent for me. Sophie, the character who I hated the entire series, is actually the character I like the most in the book. Take that back. I like Hort. Hort has always been a good character, and he just gets screwed this entire series. He's treated in this book the way Sarah J. Maas treats Cale. Just to paint that picture for you. Honestly, it was painful to read, and I've heard whispers that there's gonna be another one. I'm like, nope, I'm done. I am done after this. I cannot take any more of the series. So I just need to breathe. I do find it funny that the two books that weren't on my TBR happen to be my best and least favorite books of the month, and this is a close contender for least favorite book of the year. I mean, it's really hard for me to decide between this one and Those Who Save Us, which one of them was worse for me to read. So I am hoping that September will be a much better reading month. You're going to see some familiar books in my TBR for next month, because apparently I'm now having trouble finishing my TBR, so I might cut a book. I might not only do 3 mandatory and then a couple backlog, or I might not. I don't know yet. I'll know in like 10 minutes when I go to start filming that video. So there you go. I did read 6 books this month, which is, honestly, it's a bit low for me, but there was just so much I had to slosh through that I'm actually kind of proud of myself. And hopefully I will read better books. In fact, I will tell you my theme for my TBR is going to be popular books, because I feel like I've read so many like fringe books, popular stuff that everyone seems to like, or a lot of people seem to like, and hope I like them too and have some good books and can actually finish my entire TBR for a month. That would be nice too. Alright, so if you like my videos, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. Let's not go dropping expensive electronics, shall we? You can always click here for one of my previous videos, and until next time, talk to you later.